Amazing. All right. So welcome to this Reimagining Leadership info session. I'm really excited to be talking about the spring 2025 cohort today. My goal in this time, so we have about 30 minutes or so, is just to make sure that you have the information that you need to decide if the program is a fit for you this season. Like there's no like secret sales pitch. There's no and none of that. Like, this is just like, how can I give you all the information that you need in order to like sense into like whether or not it's a yes for you ever or this season. So that's my goal. As we go, if you're joining live, you can drop your questions in the chat, and I'll try to answer them throughout. But in terms of what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own background and Sister Season's origin story, which I probably do not talk about enough. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to talk about the intentions and influences behind the program. I'm going to talk about who it's for, which is absolutely the biggest question that I get. Everyone wants to know, am I a change maker? Am I a leader? Is this for me? So we're going to talk about that. So if you're asking that question, you're not alone. We'll talk about the experience. So I'm just going to like walk you through what it's going to be like, so that it can kind of come alive for you a bit more in terms of what the flow of the program is and what the time commitment is. And then I'll talk about next steps. If we have time, I'll share the application and you can take a little sneak peek, but we'll see if we get there. So that's what we're going to cover. And we'll just jump right in. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Rebecca McGee. I'm based in Atlanta, a New Orleans native, so definitely a Southerner. And I'm the founder of Sister Seasons. So Sister Seasons started in 2020, and its focus is really around helping change makers, especially women and non-binary change makers, to build the skills that they need to be thriving leaders who are capable of stewarding regeneration. And so that's regeneration of themselves, because we all need more personal sustainability in our work, but also like regeneration of our communities and our planet. And so the way that we do that within Sister Seasons is really using nature as our guide. And so a lot of times in this work, our focus is nature cycles. This program specifically I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit broader. So we'll be using cycles, but we'll also be working with other lessons from nature as well. My core, I'm a teacher, a facilitator, and a space holder. I love gathering people together and like just letting that magic happen on its own. And so I'm not a coach. I'm not here to tell you what to do or to be directive with anything. I'm really just creating the container for whatever wants to happen for you at this point in your career and your life. My own background is I spent 15 plus years working in many different aspects of social impact and environmental sustainability. So that included everything from funding social entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses to employee education around sustainability, B Corp certification. I've kind of done it all. A lot around philanthropy, but also environmental sustainability. Most recently, that was at Eileen Fisher. So I was on their social consciousness team for 7 years. That's played a huge role in Sister Season, so it feels important to mention that. I'll tell you more about that in a second. And so like that was my professional experience for a long time. And then on the side of all of that, I was really have been passionate about studying health and well-being basically my whole life, I would say. But it really like shifted around like maybe age 30, so almost 10 years ago, when I began studying menstrual cycles. So I became really passionate about studying menstrual cycles and women's health. That led me to study more about anatomy and physiology and the nervous system and all of that. And so that was also um, a path that I was following, and I did not expect this to ever come into being my career. But it began to intersect with my impact work when the idea for Sister Seasons arrived. And so a little bit about the origin story of Sister Seasons, in case you haven't heard it before. I know I've shared it on several podcasts and things like that. And if you've ever asked me this question, I'm sure I've told you this story. But basically, I was at Eileen Fisher. I was working on this research project we were doing around what was the intersection between gender equity and climate change. So I was going to be using this research to inform our giving portfolio, so our philanthropy at the company, but it was also something that we were thinking about at the strategic level of our sustainability goals. And so we start interviewing all of these experts in the field, and we hear over and over that women are disproportionately affected by and vulnerable to climate change. But also we need them more than ever at the table if we want to have effective solutions. And my experience at the time was that, like, I was surprised I had never heard that before. Um, but because I was really burned out myself when I was hearing all of this repeated over and over, my response was well, then we're screwed. Like, how could we ever expect women to be able to step up? And like, how dare us ask women to step up? Because they've been so harmed. We've been so harmed by these systems. And that was when I realized, like, oh, wait a second, like these systems that I've been trying to change with my climate and my environmental work have harmed our planet in the same ways that they've harmed women. And I had never connected those dots before, even in all of my social impact work. Um, and so that really sparked Sister Seasons, like the original idea. Um, and it was this realization that, like, wait a second, like, we need women and gender diverse people in leadership, making decisions about like the futures of our community and our planet. Um, but like also we need to be supporting and addressing those obstacles that are keeping them from leading. And that was where my own work in studying women's health and well-being, but also really bringing in a systems thinking lens and all of that, started to see like where are the opportunities for us to support women and gender diverse people better, so that they can actually thrive, but also so that we can start embodying these regenerative, just futures that we are trying to bring to life. Like, how can we start embodying them in the present moment? And so reimagining leadership is one of the ways that I'm putting out into the world, this way of like addressing some of those obstacles, some of those challenges that women and gender diverse people might be experiencing in being able to step into leadership or even wanting to pursue leadership. The other thread that really has gone into informing this specific program that I wanted to name was actually like what I've learned since I started on my own entrepreneurial path with Sister Seasons. And that's really been unlearning these harmful patterns that we've been conditioned. And it's like the water that we're swimming in, right? And so on the other side of having this career of working for other organizations in impact and sustainability, I realized that as a practitioner, I was often relying on the same leadership practices and tactics that had created the crises that we're facing right now, but yet just like slapping like a mission or a vision on it. It was like, okay, like I'm doing this thing for the greater good, but then I would be using the same leadership model and approaches to actually bring that forward. And I realized that like actually you can never like use those same practices and tactics and expect anything different than what we have now. Like we actually need new skills, new approaches, new ways of leading if we want to get a radically different outcome. Um, and so that is one other big piece of what's been informing this program is like starting to see like, well, what else is possible in leadership? What are those skills and ways of leading that could actually help us create this regenerative, just future more effectively, but also more joyfully? Um, so let's talk a little bit about the program then. So that's how we got to Sister Seasons and a lot of like what was sort of laying the groundwork for reimagining leadership. But in terms of the program itself, it first ran last year, so last summer, so summer 2024. And it came out of all of these conversations that I was having with women leaders in the impact space, where they were just talking about how they were absolutely had this unwavering commitment to making a positive impact in the world. And yet they were also at the same time feeling like they had to give up everything else in order to be able to do that. To be able to hold those roles and do that work, which was just really heartbreaking to me and had also been something that I had personally experienced. Uh, and the question that I was hearing in these conversations was again, like, what else is possible? Is it actually possible for leadership to feel good? Is it possible to thrive as we make a difference? Like, what would it take for me to even feel hopeful about leadership, both my own and like the collectives again? Um, and those questions really resonated for me and sparked my own curiosity. And I was also hearing in that, like, yeah, like what are the skills and practices that we need to be able to lead at this time on the planet? Because they're different than the things that we've been taught, the things that we've been rewarded for or promoted for, like what's made us successful. And so, what are they? And how can we start to cultivate them in ourselves? So reimagining leadership at its core is about us coming together, this small group of women and non-binary folks who really care about creating a positive impact in the world, to really get re-inspired, like really exploring like what else is possible for leadership. And we do that through really curated resources, as well as exercises that are going to help like expand your perspective and bring in some really maybe unexpected inspiration. It's also about sensing together, right? The answers that we need are not in a book. They are not what we're being taught in school. We need, like, we are in uncharted territory, these are uncharted waters. And so, how do we start to sense together as a community what else is possible? And what are those practices and skills that could help us at this time? And like, what kind of leadership do we need and what do we want? And so that happens, that sensing together happens through guided conversations, so the live calls that we'll have, as well as an asynchronous group chat that we'll have. Um, the other thing that it's about is really like engaging in self-inquiry and discovery. So as much as this is a community experience, there's also, a parallel self-guided journey. And so that will look like using writing practice, a weekly writing practice that you'll be invited to engage in, as well as very generous amount of invitations to get outside, to look to nature, to inspire you as well. Um, and the hope is that you really start to see like, how do you want to show up as a leader? Like, what does leadership mean to you? And that you have these resources and tools now that you can always turn to guide your leadership, no matter where you are in your career. And then the other thing that reimagining leadership is really about is like giving you like a felt experience of what else leadership could look and feel like. And so, it's one thing for us to talk about it and engage in it in an intellectual way, and I am all here for that. But also, like, how do we start to play with it and practice it together? And so that's what the circle structure is really about. And so we'll be using a tool called, a framework called the Circle Way that will both inform what the agenda of the calls look like, what the actual experience of those live calls are like. But it also helps us understand, like, how do we want to engage together? How do we want to be together? And it's much more non-hierarchical. It's more about like the power width of the community, rather than anyone being in charge of each other, right? So that is what reimagining leadership is really about. And my hope is that the outcomes of this experience for people will be that you have renewed inspiration and excitement about leadership. You feel a fresh perspective on your own leadership, and a greater sense of like, how could it feel good to you? How could it feel true to who you are? You're also going to get a ton of practical tools, frameworks, and exercises that you can keep returning to guide you in your leadership path. Um, we're also going to be doing some skill building. And so you could think about it as just like going to the gym. We're just going to be doing it as we go. Um, and so building those skills of listening, presence, comfort with complexity or uncertainty are some of the really critical next level leadership skills that we're going to be building. You're also going to get new connections and a community of support. And so my hope is that you really, because it's a small group, so there will be between 5 and 10 people, you're going to get to know each other. And in my experience, it's always just the most supportive, welcoming community. And so I'm really excited for everyone to meet each other. And then finally, the other like benefit of this is really just like deepening your relationship with nature and yourself. So like as we lead, like we have to be able to like figure out like, okay, what's my right next step? Or how do I just do this hard thing? And deepening those relationships can really provide a really strong foundation for our leadership. Um, in terms of some of the influences, so I mentioned the Circle Way as one of our core tools. The other one that we'll be using is the Work That Reconnects, which is Joanna Macy's body of work, which is informing both like the structure of our program, but also some of the content that we'll engage in. I highly recommend exploring that, but if you join the program, we'll do that together. The other big inspiration is just nature. Like we're just really gonna like get outside at times and also bring in inspiration from the natural sciences. So ecology, biology, you're gonna get some fun stories that are gonna help you think about like, how does the world work and how do things, like what does leadership look like in the natural world? We'll also talk about some wisdom traditions, bringing in indigenous voices, traditional Chinese medicine. We'll get a little nerdy there. It'll be really fun, and help us think about like what our worldview is that informs our approach to leadership. I'll be bringing in cycle awareness and my own studies in nature cycles to inform us. So some of these tools are things that I've developed on my own over the years. And of course, there's always going to be some emergent strategies. So some Adrienne Murray Brown informing us coming in, some biomimicry, and one of my teachers, Tara Moore, her work around playing big, has also been really influential for me in how I think about leadership. Okay, so who is it for? This is a really big question that I get asked. And it's been really interesting to get asked this question because it usually shows up as like, well, am I a change maker? Am I doing enough to make a difference? Or do I need to be a traditional leader? And my sense is that if you are a woman, a non-binary identifying person, and you care about making a difference in the world, particularly through your work, regardless of what your job title or role is. And you've been doing this for a while. So this isn't your first job out of college. You're not at the very start of your career. You've been working with other people within organizations for a while. And this work resonates with you. If you hear about the program and you're excited about it, then it's for you. I don't love the word change maker. I feel like it's like not the perfect word to describe this. But what is the common thread is that we all have a shared vision of and desire to create a positive environmental or social impact through our work in the world, whether that's paid or unpaid work. And it doesn't have to look any specific way. Um, so you do not need to be in a traditional leadership role. You do not need to be working directly in impact. Please don't let any of the labels like change maker, impact practitioners stop you from joining. But we do want to make sure that you do have that desire, that like that's really where your interest in leadership is from that desire to make an impact. Um, who is this a fit for? So if you're thinking about like, okay, yeah, that's me, but like, is it a fit for me? Here's a few things that might make it a good fit for you. Is one, you're questioning if you want to be a leader based on, current or past experiences, either leading yourself or observing other people's leadership and being like, I don't know if I want to go that route. So that would be a good fit for the program. Maybe you're actually already kind of actively opting out of leadership opportunities because you believe that it's going to require you to sacrifice or give up too much, or what it might ask of you. You might already be in a traditional leadership role and you're wondering like, how long can I keep going? Could this feel better? Like what else is possible? So like, yes, also for you. And then the other thing might be that you just have some really big questions about your own leadership. Maybe you realize that your definition around leadership needs some revisiting, or you want time and space to really create a vision for your leadership. That can definitely happen in the program. The other thing that you might be experiencing is that like you're doing the work, you're working to make an impact in the world, but you're realizing you need some new tools and models to actually create that impact. And maybe if you particularly want to be looking to nature and your inner wisdom around that, this would be a great program for you. In the cohort with you, as I mentioned, there will be 5 to 10 people. Last year's cohort included both, we had seasoned leaders, so people who had been in traditional leadership roles and were, pretty established in their careers. We also had freelancers, entrepreneurs, so people who are working for themselves, as well as people who are mid-career professionals, but maybe not in a specific traditional leadership role. And so everyone's going to get something different out of it, but it really is people who have some career experience, or are further along in their journey, and we're bringing in that wisdom that they've gained along the way. Yeah. Okay. And so the other thing I just want to say about like the whole thing about leadership, I understand that not everyone is going to love that word, or identify with that. And like that's totally okay. And I'm not here to convince you that that you have to add that to your identity. It's more just like an exploration and helping you find your own definition, and then how do you step into it? How do you want to express it in the world? And this can be something that you're going to revisit many, many times over your career. And so this will really give you those tools. Okay, So now I'm just going to share my screen and I'm going to talk through what the experience of the program is going to look like. Let's see. Okay. So here on this, on the Reimagining Leadership page, I'm just going to scroll down and we're going to talk about a few things. So the first thing is just the 4 components. I talked about that a little bit already, where we've got the circle structure. You've got this content that we're going to be working with. So these like very curated resources and exercises. There are self-guided practices that you're also doing. So things that you're doing on your own, like that weekly writing practice. And then you have this peer community of support. And so those are really our 4 pillars that are going to be guiding your experience. I will say that I've really made it so that we're really just working with the most essential components. I recognize that everyone is busy, and I really wanted to make sure that this felt like you weren't being assigned homework to do all the time, and that your participation could be really easeful. So there's a lot of space in this program. We'll definitely bring in other components if and as we need them. But in terms of like the actual time commitment, there will never be more than 2 hours a week that you're asked to do. So that includes your live call participation. So it also means, though, that the majority of the learning happens within the 9 live calls where we're engaging in dynamic conversation together. And so there is an expectation that you will do your best to attend the majority of the calls. And ideally all of them, right? So life definitely happens. It's okay if you miss 1 or 2 calls. But if you're joining the program, please make sure that you're able to attend the overwhelming majority of the calls live, because that's where the action's going to happen. The 5 modules. Okay, so let's talk about the actual curriculum. So the program is broken into 5 modules. Each module is 3 weeks long. The first week of every module is a pre-work drop. So you'll just be doing things on your own that week. You'll get some resources to engage with. You'll probably do some writing or another activity. It usually is about 45 to 60 minutes. And so that will happen on the first week of each of the 5 modules. In weeks 2 and 3 of each module, we will have a live call. So that means of the modules, like each module has 2 calls and 1 week of pre-work, right? So those, the second and third week of each module, you'll just have the 90-minute live call and you'll be asked to do your weekly writing practice on your own. In terms of the actual of each module, so module 1 is really where I'm going to do the majority of the teaching. So I'm going to be teaching you the circle way, which is our circle structure, as well as carrying the question, which is this cycle-based writing practice that you'll do on your own throughout the program. And then modules 2 to 3 is when we start going into these deep dives, which are really, really fun. So this is when we start to really get into the inspiration piece. And so again, that first week of those modules will be a pre-work drop. And then in week 2, we'll go into something that is called an exploration circle. And so this is going to be a guided conversation with questions that will be provided in advance, where we'll be discussing the resources that were shared in the pre-work. And then the third week will be an integration circle. This is where we will start to apply it to your own leadership, and you'll have more time to connect with your other participants. And then finally in module 5, this is where we're pulling it all together. And so we'll do the pre-work will involve doing some activities to really like flush out like what does leadership mean to you and where do you want yours to go? And then we'll really seal that in the closing session, thinking also about what we want leadership to be at the collective level. And then following the conclusion of the group portion of the program, so you'll have 2 weeks after that the group work ends to book a one-on-one integration session with me, where we'll really set you up and make sure that you're supported as you go forward. So that is the experience, very spacious, very community oriented, very meant to be really respectful of your time, but also expansive and really sparking that curiosity for you. All right, so we're just at time, and I just want to share what comes next. So in terms of the key dates, tomorrow, February 27th, the waitlist registration will open for people who have joined early. On March 5th, public registration will open to everyone. And then March 26th, the program begins with our first live call happening on April 2nd. If you want to join, all you have to do is fill out a short application. The application this is not a college application. It's not something you need to overthink. It really is just a way of making sure that we're on the same page about what the expectations of the program are. And it helps me make sure that this is a program that you would benefit from. So I don't want anyone joining that I don't think would actually benefit from the program. I like really want to make sure, because this is such a small group, that everyone has the potential to experience some kind of benefit from this group experience. So that's really what that application is about. So the majority of people who apply will absolutely get admitted. It's not a competitive process. And then once you have submitted that application, I'll review it. I'll get back to you. And if you're a fit, I'll send you a registration link so that you can join us. So that is Reimagining Leadership's spring cohort information. If there are questions that you have, like, please feel free to reach out by email or whichever way makes the most sense to you. And I would be really happy to help you figure out if it might be a program that would be a fit for you. So that's that. And I hope you join our circle.